here, and we are joined to my left by Dan Dix of Press for Truth. Of course, we got author and economic analyst here. I'm John Snyson over there, and we are at the Red Pill Expo 2018 in Spokane, Washington, of all places. What brings us to Spokane? Well, there you have it. The Red Pill Expo, which kind of starts today. We're going to start seeing people accumulate soon. I'm going to wait for a few people to tune in so we can take your questions, and we'll be right at it. Hopefully you can think of something for us to talk about, because we desperately need you guys, as always. So anyway, I guess, Dan, we'll start off by just talking about your recent Bilderberg experience, because that we talked with you right before you went, and obviously you were they attempted to censor you, obviously. You were detained several times. Like, every time I looked at my Facebook, you were detained. Can you go into a bit of what happened to you out there?
I think they've got me pegged now. Hey, Rika, the hopeful voluntarist.
Hey, how's it going?
Yeah, they know who I am at this point. You know, I've been covering it since 2006, and it looks like anytime I go to these Bilderberg conferences now, they instruct the police to stop me and harass me and check my ID and search my bag and pat me down pretty much every time. So I was getting I was getting detained, controlled, as they call it, and we'd say, what do you mean by controlled? They mean, we're controlling you. It's like, oh, okay. And yeah, so other than the police detainments, it was good. You know, we got a couple interesting confrontations. You know, I spoke with a guy named Matthias Döpfner. He's got a huge media conglomerate organization in Germany. He spoke to me pretty candid, you know, openly. Got this tech guru, this lady, Danica Krajic or something.
Yeah, I saw that. That was good. She seemed like she wasn't quite aware of what was going on at Bilderberg, and you're trying to warn her, I guess. Obviously, she didn't take the warning too well. She seemed kind of like to blow it off and everything. But I'm sure she kind of saw for herself what was going on there. If in fact what we see at Bilderberg is what we believe might be happening, obviously it's so untransparent that we have the leaders of the world and bankers and business elites and, you know, all sorts of people out there and talking in private, and we don't know what's going on. So you are left to not assume, but, you know, speculate. And that is one of the issues that plagues the Bilderberg Group meetings, is that if they are so innocent, why isn't it, you know, more transparent? These are people that are extorting us and, you know, ruling over us, and then they make decisions behind closed doors, and we don't know what they're talking about. But we do have a few people tuning in here. I saw Rika, always good to see her on here, and I saw someone named Frank. Make sure to send your questions, John. Make sure that you have that there, because for some reason the live stream here doesn't show the live stream.
Deutsche Bank is failing.
So let's talk about some of these questions here.
Well, we don't have any questions yet, but it says Deutsche Bank is failing is one of the biggest comments there. And of course, we all know that Deutsche Bank was used to bail out the PIGS countries, as I wrote about down here in the comments, Portugal, Ireland, Greece and Italy, of course, and Spain. They all used these commercial banks. The ECB used them to then, you know, funnel money to then just hide the bankruptcy of all these countries.
Yeah, well, and we've seen Deutsche Bank laying off 10,000 people, which is, boys, that's huge. Deutsche Bank's one of the world's biggest banks. Of course, it's Trump's bank. Trump has a bunch of money in there, which is also very interesting. And they were downgraded from A- to triple B by the S&P, which is pretty big. Joe Kelly says, do you support the government creating money instead of private banks? I support individuals having the ability to compete with currency on the free market and not be forced by legal tender laws into...
And eventually the government fails to do it. If you look at history, I'm writing a book right now on it. And every single time, no matter what, if it was a government or if it was anybody else, a private institution that created that money, of course, it always are being misused and then printed into infinity. So it's no jokes. And he also asks, you know, how can you take the power back from the Canadian banks? Well, take out your cash. We did a report. If you look at my Steemit article on the Canadian banks and also read my book, you find out quite easily is cash is king, and that's how you decapitate the banks, because
Yeah.
they need the cash in the current system in order to have a little bit of power. But now, of course, with the cashless society, they want to eliminate cash, so you can't have a run on the bank and expose their scam.
Yeah, and Dan, you got a question that you were looking at on the live stream there. What's going on?
Same question that he
He alluded to.
He alluded to. So I was going to say something similar. It's get out of it. You know, if you
Yeah.
want to defeat the banks in Canada, have nothing to do with them. Non-compliance, there's a lot of power there, and it's easier said than done to not have to deal with the bank. I mean, in this day and age, everything's debt-based. You almost need a credit card. Everyone's got mortgages, line of credits, things like that. But if you can sometimes maybe even lower your standards of living and own something outright as opposed to owing the bank anything, you're far, far, far better off. So I would just say have nothing to do with it. You know, delete your account, take your cash out. As I said, it's easier said than done, but that's what they fear the most.
Yeah, and I saw someone comment, cashless society, I still use cash all the time. And yeah, sure, we're not saying that the cashless society has completely taken hold yet, though I will say only 3% of US dollars are actually in cash. It's 97% cashless already. But we see in Canada, I think 1 in 12 people still actually go to a bank. Everyone else uses the online banking system. And the idea is that out of desperation, as the central bankers attempt to bring the interest rates up in order to manipulate the economy into temporary prosperity and long-term oblivion, the idea is that they know it's going to come down, and they're going to do whatever they can in order to try and save themselves. And the centralized cashless society is a great way to do that, where we see the IMF trying to push it. We see them talking about it at Davos meetings. We see Sweden, 1% of transactions are actually done in cash. We see in China, India with the Aadhaar system, where they use retina scans, Australia. All these places are slowly going cashless. It's a slow frog boil towards, I would say, global enslavement at the hand of the banking system. Remember, if your money's in the bank, it's not yours, it's a bank's. And if your money's always going through the banks via digital transactions that are centralized through legal tender laws, then it's never your money. It's always a bank's, and you are enslaved to the banking system and the government. So, Dan, what do you think of cashless society?
Cashless society is something I've been warning about for well over a decade. Been looking into it for almost 2 decades, and I've been warning that this is coming, something that we have to be very leery of, and be aware that this is a way to remove the power of us to have our own freedoms and liberties. And but don't equate. Yes, the cashless society is going to have a new form of cash. So cryptocurrencies, I do see as the forerunner to the eventual one world digital cash system, but I don't think things like Bitcoin and these other more decentralized cryptos are going to be that. I think we're going to see a lot of those kind of come and go, a lot of them crash and burn, before we ever see the introduction of this global cashless digital system, but it's coming.
Yeah, and I wanted to add to that, just from the fact that people say, the government created Bitcoin, and they very well could have, just like the internet, but look how that turned out for the internet. People have been able to take hold of the internet, use it as a weapon back against the elite, and with Bitcoin, it would have been the stupidest mistake they ever made, because anyone can create their own cryptocurrency that's decentralized and compete currencies on different blockchains and through different innovations. So to release Bitcoin to the public would be probably the dumbest thing that the government had ever done, because that will affect the central banking system in the long run. We have to remember the difference is a blockchain can be used for bad. If it's centralized, you can use it to enslave humanity. If you use it and it's decentralized and properly, it has fundamental properties to it, then you can use it to overthrow that which enslaves humanity. And the same thing goes for, and I made this analogy a million times already, many of you would probably be sick of it at this point, but you can use a gun to slaughter 1,000 people, but you can also use that same gun to save all those people from being slaughtered. You can't attack one because, one instance because of another potential instant. And I think we see the centralized, digital currencies. People equate digital currency, blockchain, cryptocurrency, and fiat all together into one when they all have different properties. And all but fiat can play into each other and have similar fundamentals, but not the same. There are different kinds of different things. So I would say it wouldn't make any sense or benefit the government to have a decentralized cryptocurrency as a world reserve currency. They can't print it out of thin air like crazy. They can't just do quantitative easing and fractional reserve lending with a Bitcoin. It makes no sense. So I would just say, of course, Bitcoin markets are manipulated, as are gold and silver markets, as is any good market out there, because the bankers want to make any possible cash off of whatever they can, and they will scrounge the very bottom of the barrel to make any amount of money they possibly can, and they will do that, and they'll continue to do that. But John, do we have any other questions here?
We got a question. It says, with Russia selling treasury bonds and getting out of the dollar, how long before the economy fails? Now, of course, what happens is that we have had a constant, kind of slow flight from the US dollar with a lot of these swaps that they're called. It's just agreements between two countries not to use the dollar-based system. So I think it's just going to get to a point where, like throughout history, any big empire like the Roman Empire, like the Portuguese, the Spanish, the French, every time at one certain point people just stopped believing in the value of their currency, and that's when their system kind of started falling apart. So I think we're just seeing just a slow end to the US dollar. It's definitely ending, and we're just seeing it. The problem is, though, we are looking at, the IMF is, really drooling at, taking the position of a reserve currency. And then, of course, China is trying to position itself within the IMF and also even have its own type of system where they're trying to create the BRICS countries, for example, and the Asian Investment Bank to then, have a counter IMF. So they kind of have several exit strategies. Some is, they really want the world global currency, but I think that's definitely almost even not impossible to look at when you look at the disagreements between the United States and China, for example. So I don't know, I think people need to wake up to that the current system, no matter what, if it's a government issued currency, as some people say, that are interest free, it doesn't matter. There's been currencies like that before that have failed because they've been taken over by greed, because they're not limited to the supply that they can create.
I see Barry Dutton's online. Hello, Barry. And of course, we got lots of familiar faces in the comments. Dan, do you see anything that's standing out to you?
Well, we got one from Barry here. He says, I want a month and a year prediction from each of these three amigos tonight, when the results of the next collapse will truly be seen and felt. The signs are all there.
It'll happen on November 3rd at 5:32 p.m. and 17 seconds. No, it's impossible. It's absolutely impossible to put a date on it. And obviously, I know he's being sarcastic. I find people basically make a lot of us look stupid. Certain people out there that have really sensationalist videos on YouTube and say, on this day of this month of this hour, it's going to happen, and then obviously it doesn't, because it's impossible to predict the end of an economic cycle to the second.
Yeah, you could say a potential of something happening, because it's definitely a huge potential of a lot of things happening. We were talking about Deutsche Bank here, for example. I think what the trigger is going to be default on some kind of country where they just don't have enough more money to funnel their way in bailouts of these pig states, as I call them, the southern European states that are so indebted, heavily indebted, their governments. I think that might trigger suddenly a default especially in Deutsche Bank or Societe Generale or other major European banks that have been used as bailout mechanisms for those countries. And I also believe that we can hugely see, of course, with the share buybacks and all the programs in stock markets that are propping them up. I think we also can see a huge stock market crash coming out of that in the very near future, because of all that. And then you got to remember, all that debt has been created and then put into these collateralized loan obligations, which then have been funneled out, similar to what happened with the credit defaults, the collateralized debt obligations in 2008. So we're kind of looking at the same kind of prospect of a crash, where now you got to look at the corporate debt is so much bigger than the little housing debt that was there, and that's I don't know how they're going to be able to bail out the economy this time, because all the major central banks have just increased. I was looking at my article that I did back in, I think it was 300 to 400% more debt on their balance sheet, and that's money that they literally printed money out of thin air and then gave it to the banks and then took all their bad debt off their balance sheets that they would have literally gone and sold by.
Yeah, absolutely. Hello, Darren. I saw your comment there. Dan, so when do you think the economy is going to crash?
Well, I'd have to agree with John. When we're going to talk about that, we got to talk about potentials. And I do think that there is potential for something to take place under Donald Trump's watch. Not that he would have anything to do with it, but that he may potentially be blamed for the coming dollar crash.
A monetary false flag.
Yeah, a monetary false flag. Exactly. Blamed on the leader of the country.
On small government, on less taxes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I do see potential for that.
That is something that I've been concerned about. Is I did a video, I think the day after the election in 2016, basically saying, oh, well, look, they're going to raise interest rates more. Janet Yellen was in at the time instead of Powell. And there's this attempt that it seemed like they were basically doing making the end results of, or making up the end results of a crash. It seems like it's there. It seems like it's going to happen any second. It should have already happened by now, but it would be perfect for them to blame it on like low taxes. Well, of course, the government's spending is way up from Obama, but the taxes are lower, which is insane. But that is mostly regarding, the markets are going to crash, the economy is going to crash. But, people say, well, I've been seeing this for 30 years. I saw one of the comments there. Yeah, exactly. And it should have happened for the last 30 years. But you have to understand that these people are incredibly smart now. They are able to manipulate the economy into prosperity for a very long period of time, longer than we've ever seen any other fiat empire last. And obviously, it should crash fundamentally, but the fundamentals aren't there. And it inevitably has to, but to put a date on it is impossible. It's best that we just tell people about it so they can make their own decisions, educate themselves, and be prepared for themselves, because it's better to be over-prepared than under-prepared. Anyway, I see Rika said they prop that nonsense up. Absolutely. Skilla Crow says, I don't think a felon can run for a president.
He's referring to somebody else's comment about John McAfee running for president.
Yeah.
I would personally love to see that. Come on, let's get McAfee as president.
It would be funny. It would be good comedy.
At least you get the crypto out to the main public. You get to educate people, and I think I look at today's today's political system as more like a theater of sorts, because that's what it's become. It's just like entertainment.
Yeah.
Looking at television, we've completely got destroyed by politics of today, and if politics are dead, we should just bury it and get away from it.
Yeah. So Barry actually asked, what are the highlights from Red Pill? Well, it hasn't really begun, so people are kind of just setting up, talking. We had a bit of a conversation with Lord Moncton earlier about several interesting topics, and that was fun. It's interesting to see a lot of names that we all recognize out here. Richard Gage is here now, which I'm excited for. I didn't see him on the website, so it's good to see him here. I was worried that, oh man, he's not showing up. I was looking forward to talking with him, but he is here, and I think both of us will probably be talking with him while we're here. It's always good to catch up with him. Lots of news on the 9/11 front in recent days, so there's a lot of stuff to talk about. Patrick says, nice truth. I appreciate that. Oh, and he did it with a capital T there for, that's exactly, I don't know if have you ever explained where Press for Truth came from, the three meanings?
I have, just in a Facebook post before. I've told people that. I think most people understand the triple meaning to that now.
Well, I think most people understand the double meaning for it, but aren't aware of the capital T in truth.
Yeah, well, Press for Truth, obviously the press is press like the media, but also press on, like let's press on towards this thing. But I always found it a fascinating, bold statement in the Bible when Jesus said, I am the truth, the way and the life as well. But I thought that was such a bold, amazing, fascinating statement to make. I am the truth. And I was like, wow, that is cool.
Yeah.
And so Truth with a capital T is because it's the name, it's who he is essentially. So when I'm saying press for truth, it's press on for the truth, but it's also press on towards him.
Yeah.
So that's,
and of course, press as media. It's a good triple meeting. I wish I actually put more effort into Wham's name. A little bit too long and a bit of a mouthful. It's unfortunate. You can't really go back on that now. I mean, it's
makes
too
me
late.
think of George Michael.
Yeah, George Michael. I get that every single time almost I tell people where I'm from. But GPU,
Well, you have
G4, I don't know. I want to be a hippie. All right.
So we got the final stages of crypto gold. Do you know where that is at? Well, the problem is they're looking at crypto gold. These both the mint too in Canada as well as looking at creating these crypto golds where it's supposed to be, backed by something. I wouldn't trust any of the mints because you got to remember the mint in Canada is, in my point of view, from what I've learned, is basically run by the Queen of England, and you have other mints, and of course you're talking about the Mint of Perth. It's the same exact thing as the Royal Canadian Mint. It's owned again by whatchamacallit and others. So I wouldn't trust anybody from the government to tell me that they would give us a crypto-based system, because so many times throughout history when they told everybody, it's like, oh yeah, we got this X amount of backing of our currency, they always have lied and they always have printed more money out of thin air, and they could easily create crypto and then not even have it backed to buy a lot of gold, just less and less, and then you could issue more and more crypto and make a ton of money. So it's a great business idea and a great business model, but it would be a scam.
Yeah, I see Jim mentioned 90% silver, 10% gold, whatever floats your boat. I actually think silver is insanely undervalued. It's amazing how cheap it is. And we just did a video, it crashed huge in recent days.
Almost 6%,
Massive manipulation in the market. That will bounce up like a beach ball, as I've said many times before. If you haven't yet, press like on the video. Make sure to press like on the video. I like to see those likes go up. We got a lot of people listening, but only 20 likes. Come on, guys, we got to fix that. We got a few comments coming in, but of course, this app is terrible, so I cannot see them on the screen. So I'm kind of just standing here looking at myself on video. Okay, here we go. John has it. One guy said that he hurt his balls in a smelting accident. Cool. Thanks for the info. I appreciate that.
Sorry to hear that.
Yeah, that's too bad, man. Let's see. Every government is headed to a digital currency, thus always be vigilant, says Barry. I agree. And that is one of the biggest issues, and that's why I try to draw the differences between, decentralized cryptocurrencies with fundamentals and, of course, the banker coins, the fully centralized digital currencies. That's a huge issue that we face. So I would guess that there is going to be quite a few interesting speakers at the event here at the Red Pill Expo in Spokane, Washington. I'm looking forward to talking with many of them. I know Dan's going to be talking with a few of them. We just saw Ed Griffin, obviously Lord Moncton, as you mentioned, Richard Gage. There's a few people starting to pile in. I'm hoping that we can update you as soon as possible. Thank you. Up to 38 likes from 20. You guys are doing good. Keep it up. Keep pressing like. Share it as well. Let's get a lot of people in here. And but we are going to get some good content here. You got to make the best of every event. It's starting off a little slow, to be completely honest, but I think that it's what you do with the time spent here, and it's how you make the best of it. So I think it's not going to be an issue long term. And besides, the event hasn't really started yet, so we will see as people flood in. Last year, I was insanely surprised that in Bozeman, Montana, we got like 650 people at the Red Pill Expo. And that's in like the middle of nowhere with no international airport, and most people were driving in. So we're in Spokane, Washington. I don't know if it's going to be that much this year, but you can cross your fingers. I was pleasantly surprised last time. Trainwreck 1993 says, Dan, do they call you Big? What, Mr. Big? I have no idea what that means. All right. Jim Mather says, if you don't have it in your possession, you don't own it. There is truth to that. There's hard wallets with cryptocurrencies as well. I think it's important to remember that, I believe value doesn't necessarily come from physical value. It comes from a subjective value. So scarcity, application use, demand, things that have, physical weight to it don't necessarily have value.
The world is completely changing in that regard. Somebody said it best. I can't remember exactly how they said it, but they said the world's largest taxi company doesn't own a single taxi. The world's largest rental hotel type thing, Airbnb, doesn't own a single piece of real estate. The times are changing. I
Yeah.
mean, you don't have to physically have something for it to be worth, have actual value.
Yeah, and those places have demand, right? And that's one of the things with Bitcoin, for example. It has scarcity like gold, it has application use like gold, and it has demand like gold. And it's just a beginning, it's in its infancy. To claim that it doesn't have value is to close your eyes, ears, and mouth to the facts when you see things like the internet, which has no physical value, quote unquote. It is in the air, it's over here, it's over there, it's not, you can't see it, but it's there, and it's incredibly revolutionary.
I mean,
to
what
say
gives
that
anything value?
Yeah.
Right? It's all comes down to our collective agreement that it has value. Look at tradable baseball cards. You know,
Yeah.
if you got a Babe Ruth rookie, we all know that's just a piece of cardboard.
Yeah.
But people out there have determined that it holds value, and therefore it does.
Yeah.
Look at the art world.
Yeah.
Why is a Da Vinci worth $400 million? Because people have collectively agreed that it does. And in the case of a Da Vinci piece of art, there's scarcity. It's almost impossible to replicate.
Yeah.
It's globally recognized. These are all some of the same things that are going for Bitcoin, which gives it value.
Yeah, and I got into this argument with Dick Diddy actually a few weeks ago on a live stream. I see he's commenting again, and he actually mentioned, if you don't mind me mentioning Dick Diddy, that he mentioned that beans have value, they have physical value, and I would argue that beans have a survival value. They have application use, as in you need them to survive. If you're in the middle of the wilderness, they are scarce, and they have demand because, of course, you want to live. So therefore, it has a it sustains your life. It's sustenance. So therefore, it's not as much about its physical value as the fact that you need it to live. So it has all three characteristics of value, which is scarcity, application use, and demand. So we got into a bit of an argument about that last time. I don't think it'll end anytime soon. That's all good. I appreciate the kickback, and I always appreciate a bit of a debate. But yeah, I completely disagree with him, but I appreciate him for being a good sport about it.
Well, people are asking if Soros is detained. I don't see anything on Alex Soros' page. He's actually, him and his dad was riding together in the Balkans, a chance to stabilize Europe. So they really hate that, of course. Hungary has been banning George Soros from coming into the country and the Open Society Foundation.
Let's talk about this for a second, because we are getting real fake news out there in independent media. And that's one of those things that I've seen a few websites. They're sharing these ridiculous stories about, well, George Soros is in Guantanamo Bay. And people are sharing it like crazy. It's like the other end of the propaganda spectrum, which is that it misinforms us and causes us to be discredited. It's exactly what Cass Sunstein talked about many years ago, and we're seeing it on full scale. I've seen a lot of what was the website again? Neon Nettle. So Neon Nettle, whether they have good intentions or not is besides the point, but I constantly see headlines out there: Barbara Streisand killed Julian Assange. It like goes crazy viral, and everyone's sharing it, and they're like, this just happened, fuck Barbara Streisand. It's like, that didn't happen. And obviously it didn't happen. Or George Soros is in prison. Hillary Clinton is secretly detained in Guantanamo. QAnon said so, and therefore it must be true. Folks, let's be very vigilant in facts, because that is how we discredit ourselves, and that is how we lose by sharing absolute nonsense around. Be very resourceful in your sourcing, because you say something stupid one time, and one of your Facebook friends who you're kind of getting on the edge a bit sees that, and they'll never listen to another thing you say again. So I think that's kind of important. You've come across a bit of fake news in your life. You've been doing this for a while. What do you think about this double-sided sword of where we have mainstream media, which is spreading fake news, obviously, and then independent media? I know you're doing a course or a seminar soon, and you're going to be talking about this kind of subject matter. What do you think of like this double-edged sword?
Yeah, and 4 days from now, I believe, 4 or 5 days from now, I'll be in Sofia, Bulgaria, putting on a seminar talking about exactly that, the problems with fake news, the difference between media and independent media, as well as how blockchain tech and these sorts of things are going to revolutionize the industry, which they already have. And I think, when it comes to fake news, you really gotta take it all with a grain of salt. Somebody asked in the question, is CBC all fake news? Well, no, not all fake news. You're bound to have some reports that are going to be truthful, and some legitimate reporters who are coming from a good intention, a well-intentioned place. Hey, I think it's safe to say at this day and age, if it's on TV, you should have a very healthy dose of skepticism.
Yeah.
You know?
I've seen, I'm not going to bring up every example because it's very unpopular to do so, and it just causes a divide in the comment section. It'll turn into a dumpster fire. But there's a lot of examples of every lie out there has a bit of truth to it, or else that truth would not, or that lie would not be able to spread. We've seen that with some of the things around 9/11 with, for example, the direct energy weapons or something like that, and they have a little bit of significance to them. I see that with the flat earth stuff. It's like, well, yeah, NASA lies all the time. That doesn't mean that the earth is flat, but they do lie, and there are some questions out there that they get right, and they rightly ask, and everyone should ask questions. But overall, to say that the earth is flat because these few things add up and they look sketchy isn't exactly legitimate. Just like we see with everything going back to the Holocaust. Of course the Holocaust happened. Of course. My grandparents were attacked in the Holocaust. It was a horrible, horrible thing. Does the mainstream media lie about certain factors of it? Absolutely they do. That's how the mistruth got out there and was able to spread so much, was because there were pieces of truth within each
Just
lie.
guiding a little bit of history to where you want it to be the final outcome, right? So it's no, for sure. Actually, we got a super chat that says, "Love your channel. Are you RT's little brother?" We're definitely not RT's little brother. We do have some certain content that might align with what they do, but they're a state-owned channel, of course, in Russia. So they are they have some content that are actually very decent, very good, but when you listen to them, they're definitely leaning and pushing towards how great Russia is, because they're state-owned by Russia.
I really appreciate the super chat, and of course, RT has a lot of great content. It's had a lot of great people on it, including some of my friends in the past, and I really appreciate RT. Obviously, you have to take everything with a grain of salt as well. So when I look at RT, I see a lot of stuff I disagree with, a lot of stuff I agree with, and good for them. It's all down to you as an individual deciding what information you're going to let in, what information you're going to determine is a fact or a lie. And there's nothing more to it. I mean, someone mentioned Kaiser Report on RT. Max Kaiser's awesome. He's a great guy. I've loved hanging out with him, and I've had a great time interviewing him, and I've had a great time getting him on Steemit, which he's been doing very well on, and he's someone that's open-minded enough to have people like our friend Jeff Berwick on and actually talk about anarcho-capitalism, which I don't think happens on any other TV channel that I can think of. So for that reason, props to them. But we kind of all do our own thing. We just do what we think is right, and we report on what we think is right, and we try to be as legitimate as we humanly can within the realm of truth. What do you think, Dan, about that kind of sentiment?
There is another state-owned media that actually does pretty good in terms of what they report on, and that is Press TV. They're Iranian. They're Iranian owned. They actually offered me a job. They wanted me to work for them full time, but I obviously don't think you guys would have appreciated it if I stopped Press for Truth and went to work for Press TV full time. But they do some pretty good work,
Yeah, absolutely.
Media group.
Yeah, quite a few years ago, I was offered a job at CBC in Canada, which is a different story, obviously. The CBC, it's probably one of the worst channels I've ever seen in the world, other than maybe CNN or those guys.
NRK in Norway.
I don't know what he's talking about, but I think he knows.
In Norway.
And CBC is it's just a garbage fire of nonsense and misinformation. So obviously I would never take a job there, and I wouldn't be able to sleep at night going to work every day at 7 a.m. to host their morning show, which they wanted me to do with 2 other people on a panel, and get paid like 70 grand a year to talk about things that I don't agree with on a script, reading a script. How could anyone sleep at night? It's about what you feel comfortable with doing when you go to bed at night.
I pretended to be from the CBC once, and it got me press credentials into the G7 in Munich. I walked into the press gallery and I said, "I registered, I'm press, I'm here." I didn't, but I just said, I signed up like 3 months ago, I'm supposed to be here, and they're like, "You're not on the list, we don't see you." And I'm like, "This is crazy, I came all the way from Canada." And they're like, "Oh, okay, Canada, journalists?" They look down at the list and they're like, "CBC? Are you with the CBC?" I'm like, "Yes, that's it, CBC." So they printed me up an official G7 press pass, and it says on it my name, CBC, and it got me access, full access into the G7, where they pampered us, gave us free food, $100 bottles of champagne. They
I wonder if they kept their job after that.
Yeah, well, somebody messed up bad,
Yeah.
real bad, and yeah, I managed to infiltrate the G7 in Munich.
Yeah, absolutely. There's a lot of luck in this game. A lot of luck. It comes down to being in the right place at the right time, saying the right thing at the right time, and it's amazing some of the places that many of us have gotten into in the past. I mean, the Trudeau press conference in 2017 makes no sense how I got in there. I'd confronted him 3 times before. How I got a press pass, I have no idea to this day. It's like someone really didn't like him and his staff or something, but I'm pretty sure they didn't keep a job after that, you know?
Somebody wants to know what's up with his eyebrow.
Yeah, I think that was actually an optical illusion. I hate to stand up for Trudeau here, but it wasn't a fake eyebrow from the looks of it. He has this darkness under. Why am I even talking about this? Such a stupid topic, but yeah, he has a darker shade of black under his eyebrow, and in the right lighting, it looks like his eyebrow is falling off. Anyway, anyway. Darth Shady is tuned in. I appreciate that. She's always great in the comment section, keeping it heated up.
Yeah, well,
What do you got
we
here?
got one. There's a guy saying, Legend Meadow says, John, did you know that the total pension liability in Norway is as big as the entire pension fund? And that's just the pensions. Yeah, of course. There's a huge pension underfunded liability around the world where there's so many people that they promise pensions, but there's not even close enough money out there to be able to contain and support that system. And of course, it recently talked about Social Security in the United States about to fail by 2026 and so on. So all these unfunded liabilities, all these promises that they promise people pensions. People have been sitting around. A lot of people haven't even saved money because they believe that the government was going to take care of them. I'm really angry and pissed off at the government because of that, because they have created an optical illusion. We were talking about that of the pension funds, the money being there, and then when it all comes down to it, you probably are not going to end up having it, especially our generation.
Yeah, actually, pensions are looking at by the year 2050, $500 trillion shortfall, which is impossible. That's like 4 times the entire world's GDP. That's not going to work out very well for anyone, and that's going to cause a lot of panic in the streets, a lot of riots, a lot of bad things, and I don't think it'll last till the year 2050. That's just an estimate based on the amount of people coming into the world, and people born around the year 2007 are expected to live to 103 years old. So that would mean that people would be getting a full wage from the taxpayer for like 50 plus years, which is insane. That's not going to work out for anybody, and obviously we need to be vigilant about that. And okay, I keep getting comments here. Trudeau's eyebrows are actually fake. Okay, I'll concede. Whatever. Trudeau's
Maybe
eyebrows
has
are
them
fake.
painted on like a lot of these ladies. My wife watched some, the videos, some makeup tutorials.
Yeah.
Maybe that's what he has done.
And
he just paint them on.
In bigger news, he's also a scumbag. But what do you got here? Yeah.
Fernando Carrasco asks, what about cannabis and artificial intelligence? Good investments or bad? Great question. I think in both sectors, it's important to do your due diligence. I mean, within the cannabis space, there are a lot of dirty players. There are a lot of usurpers who are, manipulating the scene behind the scene. And, for example, the Liberal government is only issuing these new licenses to all their insider buddies. So yes, cannabis is a good investment if you get with the right people. So in Canada, I don't know if you're talking about the Canadian market, but I would stay away from the LPs and look towards these DGs, the designated growers, who have been grandfathered in to the clause since 2001. These are the types of guys you want to support. Guys like Chad Jackett, Liberty Farms.
Yeah.
Look up libertyfarms.ca.
Yeah.
Check out grassrootsmedicinal.ca. If you want to invest in the cannabis space, that's a good space to do it. So just do your due diligence. Same goes for AI. I mean, look, let's face it. This is the way the world is heading. There is going to be a future there, and as long as we, potentially partner with the good guys, the decentralized, blockchain-based AI companies, I don't think that's such a bad thing. So.
Yeah, absolutely. And Chad Jackett is awesome. Of course, we both interviewed you. Live close by him too, so you're able to talk with him frequently. Great guy. And also, we got to remember that this so-called legalization that's coming up is a complete joke, folks. What's actually happening is more prohibition in many realms. I mean, big prison sentences for rather small amounts of cannabis. When you consider, growing up as a teenager, I saw most people around me carrying more than what the the legal limit is right now, and that could destroy their life. And if you call that legalization, it's nonsense. The legalization is a government taking away a right and then giving it back at a cost, and that cost is extortion, and that cost is, you know, all these regulations and monopolization by the government. These LPs are going to be out of control, and it's really something that it saddens me, because a lot of people are just falling hook, line, and sinker for it and going, great, everything's legal, Canada's an amazing country, vote Trudeau, you know, next election. And it's like, that's not the reality. If anything, he's just capitalizing on it, monopolizing it, making money off of it, extorting more people, and then ending up putting a lot of people in jail for victimless crimes anyways. So it's all a big scam, in my opinion. What do you think about legalization?
Legalization. Yeah, it's a bait and switch, basically. I mean, things are going to be worse. You know, we're now looking at, you know, you can't be high in public. We're talking about roadside DNA swabbing. You know, even if you're on a bicycle, they're toying with the idea of being able to grow your own at home up to 4 plants. But believe me, they're already saying it can't be seen. It's got to be out of sight, and it's not gonna be the type of system that it sounds like. Let's just say that. Like, they're getting their ducks in a line right now to basically monopolize the entire industry and take over what took decades for people in BC to build. BC Bud, globally recognized brand. They're going to steal the genetics, and they're going to benefits of the plant too, and I think that's an important one. So legalization, everybody's like, oh, this is going to be great, we can buy weed now. Well, no, you can only get the government issue weed that's been irradiated, it's been reduced medicinally. It, you know, is only going to be a certain percentage of THC. There's going to be no CBD. You can just kiss that goodbye, and it's going to be GMO seed.
Yeah, you have like Monsanto, you know, putting out the
Bayer,
patents, right? Bayer. So they're putting out the, you know, a patent on that, and then of course they will say, oh, nobody can grow weed anymore because we have the only, you know, pharmaceutically created the THC. It's that's where you're gonna go if you let the government and everybody being able to just deliver it to you, instead of actually having the guys that both Dan and Josh was talking about, giving you real good quality product.
Yeah, absolutely. And as per Rika's comment, private message me here on YouTube. I always got time for you. Don't worry about it. And I guess we will start to wrap this up, because we have gone 41 minutes, longer than I was like 15 to 20 minutes. But we get carried away here, and we got to get something done today. we gotta keep working hard and networking and getting videos done, and of course reaching out to all of you, which I really appreciate. All of you guys tuning in. Again, if you haven't yet, I'm gonna make it happen again. Press that like button. We only got 52, but 65 views, and we've got usually like 500 days worth of viewing whenever we do one of these live streams. We get a little stat after that shows how many hours were watched. It's ridiculous. I don't know how you guys do it, but I appreciate it, and I hope you keep it up and keep sending us those messages, liking those videos, and commenting, and of course share when you can. And I think I'll have to update, because I can't manually put it in before I do the video, but I will have to update all the donation links below, but you can find them on all other videos in the description and the comments, and on the screen in some cases as well. So I hope you guys check that out. We can't do it without you, because, you know, we are always getting attacked and censored on YouTube, and of course we have to stay on YouTube to stay outside of that echo chamber and be able to still reach out to so many of you, because we're not in a position yet to just give it all up and go to, you know, DTube. As great as DTube is, we got to get more people here on YouTube onto DTube, so that we can continuously spread the message there and not have to worry about losing so many of the great audience members that are tuning in right now. So thank you guys for watching. Thank you, Dan, for taking part in this little discussion. Thank you, John, over there in the Winnipeg Jets hat, making many enemies here in Washington. And we'll be back at you with much more. This is Josh Sigurdson, Dan Dix, and John Snyson signing out from World Ultra Truth. Be the change.